I felt that I got the sense of that kind of magically. There's something magical there. We don't understand it intellectually, perhaps, but it calls to our emotions and to our hearts. And it gives us a sense that the world isn't maybe how we think it is. So, rational thought is vital, okay? I'm not saying that, thinking rationally is bad. In fact, the more rational thought, the better, I would say. But it's not all of us, rational thought. There's more to us than that. There's deeper sides to us that don't seem to work under rational laws. And if we really want to change, we need to get in touch with all of us, all parts of us. Because what we might do is we might take on, while we're taught, in the newcomers class, intermediate course here at Sanganite, we talk about how we can work with the idea of karma to create a self in the future, a person in the future who is much happier. We can become kinder people, we can become happier people, more connected people, wiser people. And we might think, okay, that looks good to me. I've taken on board the fact that I can change, and that in some ways I can take actions that will help direct that change in a positive way. So I'm taking that on board, so off I go. I've kind of got my path ahead of me. So you could have an image almost of like ahead of you is this wonderful, this railway track that kind of gleams in the sunlight, okay? And it's got these parallel lengths of steel that are going exactly where we want to go, to our distant goal. There's this like straight path. All we need to do is we need to follow the precepts, meditate, study the Dharma, and we'll get there. Great railway. Okay. The trouble is, when we try and follow the track that we've laid down, we find that saboteurs might have been there and blown up some of the track, okay? So some of those, the saboteurs are those parts of our personality who were never signed up for it, actually. Thought it's, just never thought this is what was going to really happen, that we were going to really change in these ways. We might find that our track's been washed away by floods of emotion, powerful feelings that we just don't know where they come from. We weren't expecting, but they've just washed it away. Or sometimes we find that the whole track is just covered in fog, and we're just lost in the fog. We're confused. We can't even remember why we ever set out on this particular journey in the first place. So what happens is that our deeper parts come up. And particularly as we practice, actually, it's a bit like we're kind of going, come on then, deeper parts, you come and talk to me. And they don't always do what we expect them to do. So if we do want to be able to develop, what we need to do is use all our emotions, our deeper energies, not just rational argument. If we could just decide to change, well, we would, wouldn't we? And the world would just be a much better place, But it's a lot harder than that. So we need to use myth, poetry, sort of magic in a way, to communicate messages with our depths. So you probably remember from the intermediate course, I think it is, where Vidanya, or whoever's presenting the course, but it's particularly an image that Vidanya's developed. He talks about, it's as if we've got a cellar. Okay, so you imagine that there is this wonderful sort of house, this great mansion house, this great palace or castle, and there's a cellar. And in the cellar, it's very, very dusty. It's full of cobwebs, but there's a great table, a banqueting table laid out. And at the banqueting table, there are all these amazing figures. So there's magicians and queens and wizards and all sorts of magical priests and priestesses, all sorts of magical figures. The trouble is, down there in the cellar, they're covered with cobwebs and they're fast asleep a lot of the time. They're just kind of slumped over the table. And they're just, every now and then they might wake up and they kind of go, well, what's going on? So it's a bit like that's what's happening in our depths a lot of the time. Because if we lead quite mundane lives, those kind of magical part of ourselves are actually fast asleep a lot of the time. So occasionally, as I said, they'll wake up and they'll go, oh, I wonder what she's up to now. And it's like, oh, it's really boring, back to sleep. Okay? But if we can talk to those parts of ourselves, those magical parts of ourselves, with myth, with magic, they will respond to that. And those figures that I talked about, the magician, the queens, the priests, the priestesses, they're what's known as archetypal figures. And again, we talked about archetypes in the intermediate course, you might remember. And archetype is a term that's been popularised by Jung, who was a Swiss psychologist. But it's a bit of a it's very hard to pin the term down actually, exactly what he means by it. But in essence, it's a deep mental pattern. And what happens is when we encounter an expression of one of these archetypes, these deep mental patterns, and perhaps it might be in a dream, it might be in a story, it might be in a film, and often they have a really strong sense of being something very meaningful. They mean something to us. So sometimes we have dreams and they're just very mundane, and sometimes we have dreams and they really mean something to us. So that might often be something archetypal that's talking to us. They can often feel very real, actually, real in a way that actually mundane stuff isn't, interestingly. They just really talk to us. And they seem to be quite hard to explain rationally sometimes. It's a bit like they have a language of their own. And perhaps they tap into experiences that are common to all human beings. So there's images of the sun, the moon, the stars, father, mother, fire, wind, earth, water. All those kind of images that you can imagine, early humans were just really important to early humans and are really important to us as well. There's something sometimes about looking at the full moon, which just seems really meaningful. Looking at the sunset seems really meaningful. So these are kind of archetypal symbols that are deep in our minds. And if we actually decide and take, active decisions about which images we're going to dwell on, we can use those to change the way that we are, to change our being at its deepest level. And interestingly, there's been thousands of archetypal images that have appeared within the Buddhist tradition. So you've probably seen them around, the images like the Buddha here, the image that's here, those images there, images that you've seen around the place. And there's been thousands of them, literally, that have come to people who've been meditating or in dreams. And each is rich in symbolic meaning. And they express through colour and through form and through all sorts of symbols an experience which goes actually beyond that of normal human experience. What they can do is they can express to us enlightenment. So you can imagine that enlightenment, the enlightenment experience of the Buddha, of other people who've become enlightened, it's a very rich experience. It's like a jewel that has many facets. So wisdom, compassion, energy, peace, love, freedom. And these images all express different facets of those aspects of enlightenment. Or you can imagine that a bit like, you take a prism, and if you shine white light, the white light of enlightenment through it, it comes out in all the different rainbow colours. And they're like the different aspects of enlightenment. So some figures are blue, some figures are green, some figures are red. They're expressing these different colours, which are different aspects of enlightenment. And if we can interact with these archetypes, what we can do is we connect with, we can transform these streams of energy in our psyche. And actually, we also make our ideals much more tangible. So if I say to you compassion, enlightenment, well, those are great ideas, and we can have all sorts of ideas around them, but they're still just concepts. But if we meet one of these Buddhist archetypal figures, maybe in a painting or a sculpture, in a visualization, in a meditation, it's like we're brought face to face with a being who embodies enlightenment. So their smile warms us with compassion, their eyes shine with an understanding of reality. And this is like often moves us more deeply than just a list of the qualities of someone who's enlightened. And actually they're also communicating to us a message about our potential as human beings. So in some ways these figures are a bit of a fourth sight. So if we remember Maitreya Bandhu's talk last week, if you were here, he talked about the classic story of the four sights of the Buddha. So the Buddha went out and saw old age, sickness and death, but then he saw the fourth sight. And the fourth sight was like a wandering kind of monk who was begging. He was dressed in rags, but yet had something about him that was completely different. And that fourth sight is really important to us because they show us that we can change. And Maitreya Bandhu suggested that in a way the Buddha saw his future self when he saw that wandering figure. He saw what he could become. And I think with these figures that I'm talking about today, we can see our future selves in them. They can show us that we can become kinder, we can become wiser, we can have more energy. So we can be looking to, this is me in the future. And if you remember from Bodhinaga's talk, I love the idea he talked about, like, when you talk to children and they have images up on the wall. So maybe it's like, I think Bodhinaga talked about, he had a football, when he was a boy, he had a footballer and he had a violin player. And it was a bit like he had those pictures because that's who he wanted to be when he grew up. And if you think, like, what we want to do is we want to grow up, we want to wake up, using these images that we're talking about today, they can help us to become something else in the future, because they're talking to a deep part of ourselves. I think also what these images can do is they can kind of give us a vision of what's going on in the Enlightenment experience. So, as you probably know, the Buddha was enlightened, the story goes, he was enlightened under a tree, and he sat under that tree all night, and then he sat under there for quite a long time while he absorbed the experience. So if you'd been there, sitting there watching at it, what you would have seen is this kind of quite scruffy, emaciated figure, sits down under a tree, sits there all night, gets up, wanders around a bit, sits down again, kind of wanders around, sits there, nothing much happens. You wouldn't have seen anything happening because it was an inner experience. And a lot of the myth, a lot of the symbol of Buddhism expresses those interior experiences in ways that we can connect with. Okay, so I'm talking about, what I'm talking about today is what's known as the 5 Jinas, and also the 5 pranyas. And they're figures that have developed over 2,500 years of Buddhism, that to express something bigger than ourselves, something beyond ourselves, something that we can look towards. So when the Buddha was alive, people were very devoted to him. Of course, he had a presence about him. People just met the Buddha and they were able to become enlightened just through meeting him sometimes. But it's interesting that he actually, there's a story from a sutta where one of the Buddha's disciples called Vakali, and he's very ill, deathly ill, on his deathbed. And the Buddha comes to visit him. And Vakali says, I really, really yearned to see you. I really wanted to see you, in the flesh. And the Buddha actually says, enough, Vakali. What is there to see in this body? He who sees Dharma, Vakali, sees me. He who sees me sees Dharma. So he who sees Dharma, Vakali, sees me. He who sees me sees Dharma. So by truly seeing the Dharma, one sees the Buddha. Seeing the Buddha, you see the Dharma. And I think what the Buddha was trying to get over here is not to get too caught up in a kind of worshipping of the person, but it's what the Buddha was about. It was the Dharma that he taught, was what he wanted people to take up. So he didn't want people to take up any kind of just like, worshipping because he was, fantastic or very beautiful or something like that. It was what he taught. What he wanted people to do was to pay great respect to that and to honour that and to actualise it themselves, actually, to understand the Dharma themselves. So once the Buddha had died, there was no longer this sense of the Buddha being around, being able to kind of represent this Dharma. So it's interesting that for a few hundred years after the Buddha died, any images of the Buddha didn't show him. So they showed, for instance, sorry? Do you need the thingy? It was very slow before, actually. Oh, hooray! So what this is an image of footprints, the footprints of the Buddha. And it's very common in early Buddhist art. As well as that, there's also often an image of an empty throne. And actually the images are quite hard to see in pictures, so I didn't put one up. But the empty throne idea is that there's the place where the Buddha sat and was enlightened, but he's not on it. So it's a bit like, for the first few hundred years after the Buddha died, no one tried to make images of him. They actually tried to express his Dharma, his teaching, in different ways. And perhaps there's a little bit of just like in his footprints, or in the empty throne, a bit of a yearning for him, that he's gone and he's no longer here, but he's left something that we can step in his footprints, I suppose. And gradually, over a few hundred years after that, other figures, people started to make figures of the Buddha. And as I said before, hundreds and thousands of different kinds of images started to be developed. from people. I suppose, and there were people in meditation, there were people in dreams, that these images were coming up. It's not like someone sat down and thought, well, we really need an image that represents energy, so let's get something really energetic. It wasn't a kind of rational thing like that. It was a much more, let's see just what appears in the deepest of meditations. And I think also the images were like these, were tried out with lots of different people. So if it worked for you, that's great, but it needed to have a resonance with lots of other people, or else it wouldn't have existed and carried on to us today. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, so what this is a mandala. Okay, which you've probably come across before. So a mandala is a circle. And in this particular mandala, it's the interior of it that we're looking at. Now, mandalas are apparently Jung, the psychologist I was talking about before, his patients or people he worked with in psychotherapy, as they got more and more integrated and kind of more themselves or more in touch with their depths, they started to have dreams of mandalas, of circles. And also these mandalas are found in Indian art, Tibetan art, but also apparently in Native American traditions as well, in a completely different tradition, not from the same sort of history of art. So mandala represents something that's kind of very pleasing to the human mind, I think, a circle in which things are equally symmetrically placed. And if you could do the next one. So this is somebody making a mandala out of sand. And Tibetan monks in particular make mandalas out of sand, and they're very beautiful, as you can see, but because they're sand, they're impermanent, and so at the end of making it, they're just blown away, so they represent impermanence. Okay, next one. Yeah. Okay, so here we've got a mandala, and in this mandala, we've got 5 Buddhas. I'm not sure how well you can see them, but there are 5 Buddhas, and these Buddhas are called the Jinas. So mandala, Jina, okay, and these figures developed out of the Buddha, meditating on the Buddha, bringing to mind his characteristics, and then out of that various figures developed. So what I'm going to do today is explore those figures, but I'm also going to explore 5 figures who are called the pranyas. So that's pranya here, and the pranyas are female Buddhas. 5 female Buddhas as well. And although they've been around, in Indian and Tibetan art for a long time, they've not been particularly well developed. And it's interesting because Buddhas transcend gender. The idea is that Buddhas go beyond gender. They're kind of, in a way, whether they're male or female is not particularly important. However, there's something about, I think, the embodiment of enlightenment in a figure, which is important to me anyway. So it's like whether a figure is male or female, it does have different characteristics to it. So I think it's great that someone in our tradition called Vasantra, part of Triratna, he developed the 5 pranyas sort of more in their own right than they had been before. Although they'd been around for a long time, they'd not been particularly developed. And what he did is he went away for a year on a solitary meditation, and during that time he meditated on these 5 pranyas, these female figures. And in a way he did it a bit, I think it's great because it's kind of like, only happened in 2001, but it's a bit like happened thousands of years ago. He went away, and from his subconscious or wherever it was, came these figures with all their characteristics as well. And he didn't paint these pranyas. In fact, there's not even a mandala, I don't think, of the 5 pranyas that I could find. But other people have. And one of the people who has painted them, Sihapada, is here today. And it's going to be many of her paintings that I'm going to use. This is one of them, of a figure called Marmki. And I think it was interesting, actually, when I was thinking about this talk, because in a way, most of the material for this talk, it either comes from Vasantra, or from Sihapada, or from other artists. And it's a bit like, I think in the West, we are starting to develop our own tradition now, very slowly, and I think it will take hundreds of years, because you really need people the more people see the truth themselves, the kind of clearer, the more useful their images will be. But it's already starting to happen. And it also, raised for me a bit of an interesting thing about the kind of relationship I have with different teachers, as it were. So Vasantra, I don't know Vasantra at all. I think I might have exchanged 2 words with him. But I've been on a retreat that he led that was really, really important to me. And his books are really important to me as well. It's a bit like I sort of see him as a teacher, even though I don't really know him. And I'm going to go on a retreat on Friday, actually, which he's leading as well, which I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, he's done a number of long solitary retreats in his time, including a retreat that was over 3 years. And it's something like he's really in touch with something, I think. So I like the idea that he's the kind of teacher who I don't really know, but what he's given me has been a great deal. And on the other hand, Satyajoyti, who's done the paintings, I know her really well, and she's given me a great deal, but it's been on a very different level. It's on a level of a friendship. And I think it's lovely that in our movement we have these different levels. It's like there's someone who's a teacher I don't know very well, but they give me a lot. And then there's someone with whom I have a close friendship, which I gain from a lot as well. So I just when I was thinking about where this talk came from, I just wanted to say that. And I've completely lost my place now. Okay, so mandala, big round thing. Jina means victor. And what these jinas, these 5 jinas are, what they've had victory over is suffering and the ignorance that causes suffering. So these figures, these 5 archetypal figures that we're going to explore a bit more, they are victorious over suffering. Pranya, these female figures like Marmaki here, Pranya means wisdom. And it's interesting that in the Tibetan tradition, Indian Tibetan tradition, female Buddhas are associated with wisdom and the male Buddhas with compassion. So it shows that kind of like in our society, you'd usually associate female figures with compassion and the other way around. And I like the way that it shows that actually these things are very changeable. So these pranyas, anyway, they're definitely, if you concentrate on the pranyas, these female figures, it is the wisdom side of enlightenment that you'll be connecting with. Right, so let's go on then and see what we've got. Oh no, go back. Okay, so in this mandala, we've got these 4 figures. Oh no! There was actually a terrible accident with a cat here, that's anyway. So these 5 jinas, they're in a mandala. And what we can imagine, what Vasantra suggests, is that we imagine we're going on a tour around a mandala. It's like we've entered into a magical kingdom. And we're going to visit these magical figures within the kingdom. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with this figure down at the bottom. And this figure is, the jina is called Akshobhya. So both Akshobhya and the female figure, Lochana, are associated with dawn. So this is a picture of dawn. This is the blue light of dawn, the clear light of dawn, in which things seem really clear. So both Akshobhya and Lochana, so if you maybe go through. So here's an image of, a very traditional image of Akshobhya, even though it's done by a modern artist actually. And in it you can see he's very blue, so that blue colour of dawn. He's associated with elephants. So there's elephants there. All of these figures have got all sorts of associations with them. So time of day, animals, colours, different sounds, all sorts of things. And he's also touching the earth, which is a really important mudra, which Bodhinaga talked about. So if you keep going. So this is a more modern version, where you really get a sense, I think, of mystery, actually, that kind of dawn of something coming out of mystery. Keep going. Okay, so here is Lochana. So Lochana... So I talked about Vasantra, talked about Sihapada. So Akshobhya and Lochana. Okay, so they're the jina and the pranya. So dawn, it's about, it's associated with beginner's mind actually. It's associated with seeing things as they really are. So, a clarity of seeing things. And it's also very much associated with this particular mudra, this touching the earth. So if you do the next one, and maybe another one as well. Yeah, I love this one actually because that very fine gold nail varnish. So touching the earth. So you might remember that the story of touching the earth comes when the Buddha's very, very nearly enlightened, and the figure that represents what gets in the way of enlightenment, who's called Mara, comes to him and he says, "What right have you to sit on the throne of enlightenment? Who do you think you are to do this? How dare you, in a way, presume that you're going to get enlightened?" Which is, I think that might be that kind of doubt is quite a kind of common one in a way. It's like, who do I think I am to think I can do this, And so what the Buddha did is he simply touched the earth, and in touching the earth, he called to witness the earth goddess. And the earth goddess came up and witnessed that actually the Buddha had every right about to become enlightened. Throughout many, many lifetimes in this mythical story, he had acted ethically and kindly, and he had absolutely had the right to do this by the way that he behaved through many lifetimes. So if you can, where you are, I suggest you do that particular gesture and touch the earth, or touch the chair perhaps if you're in the chair. And just for a minute, just sort of feel that sense of being in touch with the earth. So I don't know if anyone's brave enough to say how that feels. Is it? What did you think? Something, okay. That's great. So many people felt something. Go on.
Connection.
Okay, connection. Yeah.
Grounded.
A groundedness. Yeah. I mean, that's what it feels to me. It grounds me. I think and that's what the Buddha was doing, isn't it? He was grounding himself in the reality that he actually had acted ethically. It was absolutely possible for him to become enlightened, and that those doubts, the doubts that Mara was expressing, they just weren't based in any reality. So this is very much Jina and Apranya. They're figures about being in touch with reality, being in touch with our actual experience. And all these figures have got many different things associated with them, but one thing they have is a wisdom. And the wisdom of these figures is called mirror-like wisdom. Because a mirror just reflects what there is. It doesn't put any stories onto it at all, unless it's got some kind of thing on the surface. But a good mirror just reflects what's there. And it's a bit like these figures allow us to just reflect what's actually going on. Not to have all those stories that we go into, etc. So that, so this is being in touch with our actual experience. So I think what these two figures can really bring to us is if we're really caught up in stories and we're feeling unclear and we don't know what's going on, particularly in meditation perhaps, you've got a lot of thoughts going on, a lot of kind of distraction. You can just touch the earth, and in that moment, just be in contact with what is actually going on for you in your body at that moment. Okay, so there's masses I could say about these figures, but I'm not going to because I could be here for weeks. We could do weeks and weeks on them. So let's go back. So we've been into this figure who's actually in the east, who's dawn, and now we're going to go to this time of day. So this is sunshine, midday, golden light, and summer. And the two figures that we meet here are called Ratnasambhava and Marmaki. Okay, so here's quite a traditional picture of Ratnasambhava. Interestingly, he's got a begging bowl, which they don't always have. So the important thing about all these things I'm telling you, it's not like every single figure, it's not like they're neatly in little boxes. Do you see what I mean? It's like, they all have different things going on with them. But he's got this mudra which is of generosity. Next one. And here's a more modern one. So you can see again, he's got this hand gesture of generosity, of giving. And again. And again, maybe. Yeah, okay, so this is. Oh, I haven't taken that picture very well. Anyway, this is the same image here that we have. So this is a figure called Marmaki. And I think personally, for me, Malviki's been a very useful figure actually, because what she is called is mine maker, M-I-N-E, mine, making things mine. So it's not like she goes mining. What she does is basically, to her, everything is part of her. So therefore, she doesn't crave anything or kind of get jealous of people or wish she had characteristics that other people had, because it's like she already has them. And I think my best experience of that was I went on holiday to Guernsey, I think it was, and it was lovely actually. I was having a lovely holiday, but I went for a walk along the cliff top, and there were these amazing houses looking out over the sea, and I went into full-on, I wish I could live there in an amazing house looking out over the sea, then I'd be really, really happy all day long, kind of thing. And then I realised actually, at that moment in time, I was standing by the house, looking out at the sea, being very happy. So why did I think I needed to have the house all the time? In a way, it was already mine. You see what I mean? And I don't have any of the bother of the upkeep of the house or anything. It's just like, it was already mine. That experience was already mine. I didn't need to own the house to have it. And I think quite often I can find myself in situations where, and it's not just with things like houses, it's also with people. I think, oh, I wish, I had the confidence of this person, or I had the ability to sing of this person, whatever it is. I'm kind of wanting this kind of thing. And I think what's great about Mind Maker is you get the sense of it is all mine already. When I went on my ordination retreat, which is where I went for 3 months up a mountain in Spain, I got a really good sense of that, because at the beginning I met a lot of women and I didn't know who they were, a lot of them. And I was envious of someone and their particular abilities to do things. But by the end, I felt like we were all part of the same group, and I just really delighted in their abilities to do things, like the artists and the people who could make bread and all this kind of stuff that used to give me a lot of pain because I wish I could. And at the end it was just like, oh yeah, but she's kind of part of me, because she's part of my ordination. We've been through this thing for 3 months together. And that was a really great experience actually, to see how we can, I can enjoy other people's talents, what they can do, because actually it is sort of part of me anyway. So, yeah. So I suppose what happens is that at noon, which this is the time of day when the sun is out, this golden light, is that we're very relaxed actually. We can really relax. That summertime kind of feeling when it's very warm, it's lovely and you can really relax. And I think when we're in that situation, it's easier to see what we have in common with other people, which is the wisdom of Ratnasambhava and Malmaki. It's the wisdom of what we have in common, the sameness. And it's not a dreary sameness, it's the fact realising that actually, for all of us, we all want to be happy, we all don't want to suffer. Whatever situation we're in, whoever we are, whether we're a slug or whether we're a prime minister, we still have the same, we don't... It's true. We still want to be happy, and we still don't want to suffer. So, and from that place of relaxation, that place of feeling what's the same with us, we can give. We can just give, because why wouldn't we give? Because if people are the same as us, why not give? It's a bit, why would you want to keep stuff for yourself? So this is where, like the figure of Malmaki, the figure of Ratnasambhava, they identify with everyone. Not in a kind of horrible smothering way, trying to sort everything out for them. It's more that they see in all of us what is the same for all of us. Okay, so let's move to the next one. So that's just that gesture of giving again. Oh, I know what you're meant to do now. Give it a go. Just see how that feels. So, how did that feel? Did anyone feel like... Open. You did feel open, yeah. I think I do actually, it does. It's very unprotected actually and defended kind of thing, isn't it? So again, if you're feeling really tight in your meditation and you're caught up in stuff or just in your life, you can just try opening out and giving. So let's see what we've got next. Okay, back to the mandala. So now we're going around to the top of the mandala and we're going to see the figures who are to do with this time of day, sunset. So these are the figures of Amitabha and Pandaravasini. Okay. It's two names now that I just have to say to myself a lot. It'll be Pandaravasini. Okay, so this is the setting sun. The West. This is to do with craving and passion. These figures are associated with a poison around craving and passion. And it's a bit like, we do have this intuitive sense, don't we, that there has to be more to life than we currently experienced. And it can get translated into a feeling that our lives will be enriched if only we get whatever it is, or they'll be even fixed if we get whatever it is. And actually, we're right to have that sense, because our lives could be much more rich and more fulfilling, but only when we actually let go of that craving. That's the paradox. There is more to life, but if we keep thinking that whatever we get next, the next job, the next house, the next trip to Guernsey, whatever it is, that will make us happy, then we will find ourselves in a cycle of unhappiness. It's when we're able to let go of that craving that actually we will be able to just have a contentment, a richer life. So if we keep going, so this is Amitabha, the Jinnah, and at the time of ordination, most order members take on a particular meditation practice, and this Amitabha is my practice. And the kind of ways that people decide which of these figures they might want to take on is kind of mysterious in many ways. I think for some people they go through a long process of there's lots and lots of different figures they might choose, and they're not sure. Some people actually don't choose a figure at all. They might choose to maybe just really concentrate on metta or mindfulness. But for people who find the figures useful. But for me, it was really interesting, because the way I kind of did this, I remember going on a retreat at Taraloka, which is a retreat centre in Shropshire. And there were all these figures on the shrine, and I was a bit, I don't really like this, all these figures on the shrine, it's a bit kind of weird, all that stuff. Anyway, there was this little Amitabha with his hands like this meditation mudra that we'll look at in a minute, just this little wooden one. And I became really attached to him. But it wasn't until they moved him to put another figure on that I was like, what? Why have they got rid of him? And I'm just really getting to like him. And it's been since then, actually, I personally haven't really felt that I needed any other figures to kind of experiment with or whatever. I'm very loyal to Amitabha, actually. And, I think sometimes with Amitabha I can feel like, so we've talked about visualization a bit, perhaps as something that people do. So I do see things a bit, but not much more. I get a sense of, if I open my eyes when I'm calling Amitabha to mind, maybe I'd see him. I mean, I don't, but it's that sense that he's in the room with me. What would it be like if he was in the room with me? So I think if you're worried that you don't have this strong visual sense, what you could do is have this sense of perhaps what would it be like if he was here with me right now, or she was here with me right now. Yeah, and I just thought I'd tell you a dream that I had just before ordination, because I felt like, I was talking earlier about there are those very strong dreams that mean something. And so I had a dream that I was in an aeroplane, and for some reason it was going to crash, and they said, please come to the front and sort it out. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to the front. I don't know what I thought I'd do, actually, because I don't have to fly a plane. But anyway, I'll go to the front and I'll sort it out. But when I got to the front, I could see that we were flying straight into a brick wall, and there was no way out. And what I found myself just doing, completely naturally in the dream, was Amitabha's mantra. So I thought that was kind of a really powerful kind of symbol to me, that there was something going on there, that even at that point in the dream of kind of like some kind of real death or spiritual death, I called on Amitabha in that way. And it's a bit like these figures can be like that for us. They're not gods. They're not in any way that you can pray to them and they'll kind of make your life better or anything like that. But they are figures that we can call on. Okay, so he's very much linked to meditation, and in that picture, I don't know if you can see that his hands are in the meditation mudra. So, difficult for me to do that, so we can just try doing, so the meditation, actually, if you just keep going, yeah. So there's a sense that, that's the kind of traditional one, but there's also one where you just rest your hands on the other. This might be the way that you have your hands in meditation anyway. How does that feel? Contentment. Yeah, I think for me I've got a sense of kind of strength actually and contentment. Like I've got one hand resting on the other and it kind of feels quite strong and very stable. Sorry? Like a cradle, yeah, it's true, like a kind of, yeah.
It's kind of intimate in the way that the others...
Yeah, because the others are just sort of one hand, aren't they? And this is two hands. Okay, so if we keep going. So, but particularly in Triratna, so these Buddhist figures are in all Buddhist movements, but in Triratna, particularly with Amitabha, there's the idea of him holding a lotus, offering us a lotus. And that comes from something that Sangharakshita, who founded this movement, that he experienced, this idea that Amitabha was actually holding up a lotus. So these figures can have more than one mudra. So it's a bit confusing. It's a bit like you look at a picture of a Buddha or something, you kind of go, oh, which figure's that? But actually, it's not always completely clear just from whichever mudra they're doing. So if we keep going. Yeah, so that's holding up the lotus. And I couldn't actually get, for some reason, I didn't get to see Harpadar's image of this particular pranayasa. This is somebody else's. So this is Pandaravasini. She wears a white coat, actually, which is associated with being deep in a meditative, deep in the fourth stage of dhyana. So deep in meditation. Okay, so let's have the next one. Okay, so we're now going around the mandala again, and we're going here to the green Buddhas. Okay, so this is midnight now. So this is a sense of the mystery of midnight. And in this space we have two figures called Amoghasiddhi and Tara. So maybe if you have the next picture. So here's a traditional picture of Amoghasiddhi, and maybe another one as well. Okay, so the thing about Amoghasiddhi is this is his mudra. So it's the mudra of fearlessness. Okay, so I'm just going to read to you from, maybe actually I could do another. So this is a traditional picture of Tara, who is the pranayasa. So Tara you've probably come across. So Tara is probably one of the most well-known, popular figures, female figures. And here she's representing fearlessness. So maybe again, face. Yeah, a picture of her. Okay, so what I really like about Harpadar's pictures, actually, which probably hasn't particularly, they're not very good copies of them, but is that they have a kind of looseness of freedom that the traditional pictures don't. And I think that's hopefully that's something in the West we're going to develop, a sense of like, not these very formal ways that those traditional pictures I've shown you are, but these kind of much more freedom in their movement. I love the way that she's kind of throwing her hair. There's a real sense of movement in that. Okay, so what I want to do is just read to you a little bit from a puja. Now, a puja is a ritual, and the Santra wrote pujas for all these figures, and this is from the puja to Tara. And I just wanted to read you out because it gives you a sense of fearlessness, I suppose, what kind of fears, how you might call on a figure like this. So it's in a section of the puja which is called confession. And that's not kind of like Catholic confession, where you just kind of say it and you say a few Hail Marys or whatever. I don't know actually if that's what you do in Catholic confession. That might not be an accurate thing. What this is, it's just letting go of things that are holding us back. So what we can call on Tara is we can say, "Fearless lady, powerful queen, you who save beings from the 8 great terrors of wild beasts, robbers and so forth, please rescue me from the 1008 fears and anxieties that possess my mind. Before you I confess to all the commonplace worries and anxieties that fill my day, so that I rarely take an easy breath. The fear that stops me trying, the fear that creates a facade, the fear of being with others, the fear of being alone, the fear that makes me harsh, tight and unkind, the fear of not getting what I want, that makes me grabbing and self-concerned. Before you I confess the deep fears, fears of madness, fear of death, fear of life, fear of anything, beyond the tortoise shell of my own ego. Before you I confess most of all the fears that hold me back from giving myself to the Dharma. Fear of commitment to the path, fear of change, fear of renunciation, fear of generosity, fear of courage, fear of going deeper, fear of freedom, fear of wisdom, fear of devoting myself to all beings. These fears did not arise by themselves. They stem from a million choices and acts in many lives, choosing unawareness, choosing lack of courage,
choosing to bury my head in samsara. Help me to lay these fears at your feet. May you pacify them all. O loving Tara, please take my shaking hand in yours and gently form it into the mudra of fearlessness. So the mudra of fearlessness is like this. There we go. Okay. So I get quite a lot of strength from that. It just feels really like, stop. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we're still going around this magic land, this mandala, and we've been right around all the figures actually. And now it's a bit like we've learned something from all these figures, and we can go right into the middle and meet the figures in the middle. So they are the blazing sun, the blazing white light of the sun. And like you can't look at the sun unless you take some precautions, unless you're ready. And it's a bit like, to see these figures, to see reality really, we do have to have, in a way, engaged with all those other figures first. And what they represent is space. And not space out there, kind of the final frontier, but space. But space in our own minds, in our own beings, internal space. And that nothing, they represent the fact that nothing is fixed. Everything is in the process of transformation. And it's the realm of truth in which it kind of incorporates all those four figures on the outside as well. Very mysterious, I think, these figures. So this is Vairocana. So Vairocana is the Jina who represents this, and he's a figure who teaches the Dharma. He knows the truth. He's a figure, he's called the illuminator. He illuminates us with his teaching. Okay? And here we have Akasha Dateshwari, and she represents space. And I think that's a really beautiful picture actually, where that sense of, so she has actually here, this is the wheel, which is the wheel of the Dharma, the bell, the Vajra bell, and she's holding these lotuses. And there's just a sense of her, I think, of her spaciousness, of potential there, of simplicity as well. Okay, so let's see the next one. Okay, now I love this one actually because associated with this female figure are some lionesses, and you might not be able to see them down there, but her animals are lionesses, which I really like. Okay, so these figures too, they are representing they're the great sun, they're the cosmos, the illuminator, turning the wheel of truth. So something very powerful there in the centre of the mandala, something mysterious. Okay, so I want to finish just with a quote actually, which is about the way, for me it's quite the quote represents to me the fact that all these figures, we've looked at the different light they represent. The evening, the sunset, the dawn, and then this great white light in the middle. And actually light, our own light, although we want it also can scare us. So I think this quote sums it up really well. It's from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.